2 minutes after, so let's go ahead and get started. We always like to kick off the meeting by having new people introduce themselves. Before that, though, does anybody want to take notes? Radu?
I can take notes.
All right, thank you. Yeah, so any new people on the line or anybody that hasn't been here for a while that would like to reintroduce themselves?
I'm Joe. I haven't attended before, working on the registry project inside of Pivotal.
Cool, welcome.
Thank you.
Okay, the first item on the agenda, and I pasted the link to the agenda into chat. First item on the agenda is issue 279 in the CNAB-Spec. Leah, do you want to take that away? You're muted. There you go.
This is just like credentials seem to be basically like parameters, except that they're like what you put in them is like semantically different. Like that credentials are supposed to be you borrowing the user parameters just for the invocation image versus credentials you're borrowing just for the invocation image parameters, you're going to keep using it for the thing you deployed. Which seems to me like they should have all of the same features of like, you should be able to use definitions and you should be able to like, just sort of like have all of the same options, including like making them not required for certain actions and stuff like that.
Cool, that sounds good to me. Does anybody have any objections to taking that path? I think that it necessitates us to start to work on a 1.1 milestone because this will be a change, but it's is a huge change.
Would it be an incompatible change? Kind of thought it would be.
Yeah, I think it would be.
So wouldn't it be a 2.0? I mean, forget marketing. Just from a Semver point of view, it should be 2.0.
Yeah, I think it needs to be 2.0 because it's like, I think the structure should change enough that it's not. I think you're not if you're just adding things, then it would be 1.1. But I think like you probably want to require definition just like parameters. So
another idea, which is probably very bad, but we could consider would be to deprecate the old credential and to add a new type of credential that has the same structure as parameters, just to avoid doing a breaking change and doing an addition.
Are there enough bundles out there that it's going to be painful to change over, like to bump versions? I feel like I can sort of see like that kind of change when like there's going to be a lot of pain for a lot of people, but I feel like we're still small enough that it probably just makes sense to bump versions and change things.
Yeah, that probably makes sense, and I will refrain myself from commenting on marketing Semver and actual Semver.
If we go the route of like doing a 2.0 and changing the structure completely, what about the idea of just not even having a credential section? Like it's not, if we make it exactly the same as parameters, it ends up being not different at all. And the only difference is that you can have sensitive parameters or you can call credentials something and they're also sensitive. At that point, I feel like it just makes sense to just have the parameters section itself.
That makes sense to me as well. Yeah. It's kind of awkward to have two separate sections. If we just have a way to mark a parameter as sensitive, that seems to really solve this nicely.
Oh wait, so this is down here. The difference isn't that credentials are sensitive and parameters aren't. It's that credentials represent the user who is executing the action of the bundle, and the parameters are like values that are stored with the application. So that may be like the application's database password, like that's still sensitive, right? But it doesn't represent you, the person, your identity. That's like the distinction that Butcher has made to me when he's explained this to me in the spec.
Yeah, that's the understanding that I have of it as well. I guess like I'm thinking, couldn't you use a parameter in that same way, where a parameter is the thing that gets used by the person invoking the invocation?
We'd have to make other changes as well then, because credentials are not stored with the claim specifically so that when you switch off who's performing an action on the bundle, you don't end up persisting someone's credentials, so that if I perform an action, say I install, okay, my username and password, for example, for a cloud provider, don't end up getting reused by someone else when they do a subsequent action, and you have both an audit trail and then someone else isn't literally using my own credentials, which would be a pretty big security problem as well. It needs to be, I perform an action with the bundle using my credentials, and then somebody else on the team uses their credentials to interact with the bundle, unless they're using some other mechanism to use shared credentials, which moment is kind of not even allowed for in the spec.
I feel like when we've talked to teams that are in Duffel that are building bundles, this like distinction has resonated with them in the sense that the invocation image does some things, and there's different credentials that are used by the thing they're deploying. But maybe like rather than have like, I feel like the thing that's really confusing every time we explain this is that parameters and credentials sound like there should be one that's like not secret stuff and the other one's secret stuff. Would maybe having a parameter section that like has some kind of tag to say which ones are actually like our semantic difference between parameters and credentials, maybe like there's something more like that could be used, where like where we have like one list of all your inputs, and then maybe there's another tag that, so that the structure always stays identical. It's just like one list that's all like just basically parameters, and then there's a different like Boolean or something to say this is like a borrowed credential as opposed to a normal input.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's super confusing. It took me quite a while to wrap my head around it, and it's still kind of awkward. I think it would necessitate like that CNAB 2.0 for real, because it's kind of a big change in how I think credentials are treated, though. I don't know, that's just me. I know that Butcher would have a lot to say about this, so I feel like I'm trying to represent him probably poorly here. Sorry.
I do want to add, I think there is a use case for passing in sensitive data to applications, not just the invocation image. So my understanding actually has not been that credentials should only be used for like passing in things that the invocation image needs to authenticate to the infrastructure that it deploys to. Like one example use case would be having a bundle that creates a database and then passes in, and you can get as an output a database credential from that bundle installation, and then pass that in as a parameter or a credential then again to a new installation with a different bundle that actually connects to the database. So it would be very advantageous to have a standard mechanism for sharing that sensitive data between bundles.
My assumption was that when you're passing it in for the deployed application to use, it's always a parameter. So like when we were implementing like a CNAB runtime, it was any parameter could potentially be sensitive, so they all must be treated as if they are sensitive.
I think it would be then useful to have in the spec a field to say whether or not a parameter should be considered sensitive, because that should be surfaced differently by tooling to not put it in logs, etc.
We do have is it write only? Porter uses that. We actually call it sensitive, but we map it to bundle.json as write only, which means it's not put into logs and things like that, and it doesn't get printed to standard out or anywhere.
But is it stored in the claim?
Sorry, go ahead.
Sorry.
Yeah, fortunately, all parameters have to be stored in the claim.
Okay.
I feel like it would make a lot of sense to be more explicit about that in the spec, though, so that more tools can be built around it to have that same understanding.
Yeah, I thought we clarified that as part of one of the last minute issues that we did, like the other week before we hit 1.0, but let me check that.
Thanks, Radu. I think I just missed that.
Oh, okay, yeah.
Okay, so I'll summarize what we've discussed so far. This issue 279 is structurally a major change, so we should probably think about a 2.0. But kind of piggybacking on that, there's more discussion about whether credentials and parameters should be separate, whether they should be unified, or how we should rethink those things. Does it make sense to kind of spin off a working group or whatever to discuss this stuff? Should we just do this in GitHub, or does anybody have any preference on how we tackle this? It seems like a fairly major change. Will take a little bit of work to do.
Yeah,
I think there's a lot of nuance that we're going to lose if we just talk about this in an issue.
Yeah.
It would help to do at least another meeting or two.
Okay. In other kind of efforts like this that I've worked on, it was useful to have like a spin-off meeting or two, like Carolyn mentioned, where we could discuss this in depth and then come back to the larger group. Does anyone want to spearhead this? Or I can, if somebody else wants to.
My other question, not necessarily related to this specific issue, is whether we have other things that we deferred to 2.0 of CNAB core that we might want to start discussing or not, or we just want to focus specifically on credentials and parameters right now.
I think that we should have targeted meetings for all of those things. If we try to shove too many things into these meetings, I feel like we won't be able to dedicate enough time to them to have good in-depth discussions. But it probably makes sense to start a milestone to track 2.0, and we can start adding issues there. Obviously, this will be one. People can feel free to open issues and tag them to that milestone if they have some, if that works. Okay. Okay, let's go to the next issue, unless anybody else has something they want to add there here. Okay, next topic, running custom actions in Duffel.
Yeah, I wanted to add an issue for this. Notice that when you're trying to run a custom action in Duffel, you need to have a claim beforehand, which means that at some point someone needs to have run Duffel install. Because the way that the custom actions works is that it references the bundle definition inside of the claim to know if what custom actions can run. And I was thinking about making a change where you can run a custom action independent of that, unless there's a reason for this workflow that I'm not sure of, then maybe we should just document that. But that was my current thinking.
Should we be able to run stateless custom actions without a claim?
I think so. The use case that I'm thinking about is if I wanted to have some sort of pre-install step that would do some verification or just like do like a prerequisites check. So that wouldn't be changing any state or anything like that, but it would just be checking that, does my Kubernetes cluster have X, Y, or Z kind of stuff.
Yeah, I think, doesn't the claim contain information about the installation that we would need if we're going to invoke an action that would do something like that?
Yeah, that is true. But I guess like if I didn't need very specific information to still be able to run some stateless action beforehand, I think, without having to run install.
Yeah, and just to reiterate what I pasted in chat, I think you could only be able to run stateless actions without having a claim beforehand. And that should totally be possible with Duffel, I think.
Okay, then I can give that a shot and see. And in terms of stateful actions beforehand, I guess that would have to be only based on like the installation state that is inside of the claim. So we can keep that separate. Cool.
Cool. That sounds good to me. All right, next up, Carolyn is going to demonstrate some dependency implementation in Porter. You want to start sharing, Carolyn?
Did we skip an agenda item there?
Oh yeah, sorry. Totally skipped over that. It's my own agenda item. So now that we've gotten this JDF thing going, does anyone have any feelings about keeping the spec and Duffel and cnab-go in the deislabs repositories, or should we move to a new organization where we can give everybody else better control over things? Because deislabs is kind of it's a Microsoft thing. Seems like more independent would be better for these things, because the spec is a spec, and then cnab-go and Duffel are really core pieces of implementing the spec that people can build on.
I don't have strong opinion, again, but we also could move cnab-to-OCI there.
Okay.
I was going to say maybe the spec and the implementation ought to be in separate organizations so that we can get the access control better. Because at the moment, it's a bit of a mess. You get access to Duffel and you get right access to the spec and vice versa.
Yeah, so we can handle that through just changing the teams around. We should be able to make better groupings, and we just haven't done that so far in deislabs. But if we move to a new organization, we can make better admin groups too, so we can give better control to people in the community that want to serve as admins. And this may play into Carolyn's contributor changes down below. But like, I think that it's better for us to move these things out of deislabs just so we can have a more neutral ground and like move OCI or CNAB to OCI in as well, like Sylvan mentioned, would be a great thing to do.
It did occur to me, I wonder if we could switch to Go modules at the same time, because it's going to be an impact on the consumers and might as well get it all over in one go.
Mm-hmm. Lots of stuff to unpack there.
I'd be in favor of that.
Spoil the ocean, or I mean, I prefer maybe to do that in 2 steps at the very least, so that if we can just isolate breaking people, we'll know what broke them. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I guess we could get to Duffel 1.0 in deislabs, and then add Go modules, and then separately switch to the new org.
Yeah.
Another reordering that seems to be a bit tricky. We can move to the new org, go to 1.0, Go modules, I suppose. Just trying to reduce the number of times people have to redo their imports.
Oh yeah, I was just thinking so that we don't have people submitting bugs where they can't tell if the problem was the repo move or if the problem was Go modules, you know what I mean? And trying to tease it apart.
Yeah,
So
you're right. Let's keep them separate.
get to one point, know that we're good, and then when they come up with a problem, we can identify which one was it and help them. I don't know how many people use our stuff, to be honest, or if it's just the people here on this call, but maybe I'm worried about nothing. I'm just thinking of like logris and stuff like that.
Okay, so we can start making a new organization for this stuff and move the spec there, since there's not a lot of dependencies there, and figure out the rest of that. Does that make sense for everybody? Okay. Okay, so that takes care of that issue. So now the next one is Carolyn, talking about dependency importer. Stop sharing so Carolyn can take over.
Alrighty. So I don't think Jacob's on the call.
I'm right here.
He's in the conference room.
Oh, okay, cool. You had his self name, so I couldn't see if you were there. So we were talking about the dependency spec and wondering how far along it was. So I just wanted to show what dependencies looks like in Porter right now, because Porter is implementing what the dependency spec says right now. Oh, and if you're chatting at me, I don't see you. So sorry. So in Porter, I have two bundles right now. I have a MySQL bundle and a WordPress bundle. So in the MySQL bundle, this doesn't have any dependencies. It's just a normal Porter bundle. And it has a couple parameters. It has a database name, MySQL user, a couple other stuff. And I've pushed it up to a registry. And in the WordPress bundle, I have a new unique section that just Porter has called dependencies. Or I don't know, maybe someone else has implemented it, and that'd be totally cool. Let me know. But at the moment, I think Porter just has this. It's a dependency section. And it has aliased the tag MySQL or Porter MySQL bundle 1.0 at a specific version. At the moment, Porter just does specific versions or no version, and it picks the highest. But I picked a specific version, and I aliased it to MySQL. And I passed it in a specific parameter. I decided to override one of the Porter parameters. I overrode database name and MySQL user. Instead of just picking some of the default boring names, I wanted to say, no, I specifically want the database name to be WordPress and the MySQL user parameter to be WordPress. And what's going to happen now is that when I install the WordPress bundle, Porter is going to, well, actually, before I even install it, let's look at the bundle.json. If I look at that real quick. Let's format that. That's not pretty. All right. So as part of the spec, in the custom section, there's a well-known custom extension, IO CNAB dependencies. And WordPress is saying that it requires a bundle called MySQL. That's that alias. And the bundle here, it says it needs this tag right here. Okay. And so what happens is when Porter goes to install it, it's going to install the MySQL first. So if I do, so I'm going to install WordPress. I'm going to give it the Minikube credentials, and I'm going to give it a required parameter, my password here. And you can see immediately it started kicking off and running the MySQL dependency. Oh, that went really fast. So this is Porter's output. So it's installing MySQL. It's talking to Pillar. This is the Helm output. MySQL is this Helm chart right here. So it's installing it. And it's getting the outputs from MySQL, and it's passing it into WordPress. So when it's executing WordPress now, it's getting the database. These are start out. That's that write-only stuff. So it's getting the username and password out of the MySQL bundle and passing it into WordPress, and then it's kicking off the WordPress bundle and executing it. So now if I just do a Helm list, this is all inside a mini cube here, so it went so fast. I have my 2 bundles installed, one installed MySQL and one installed WordPress. I have custom actions installed or inside my definitions for both of these. So they have install here, and you can see like here were the outputs coming out of MySQL. But they also had custom actions. They both have a custom action called ping, and they say where they're coming from. So here's one ping. Here's another ping. It says it's coming from WordPress. So if I do porter invoke ping, we're going to get 2 pings. First from MySQL again. It goes in dependency order. You'll see ping from MySQL. And then another one, ping from WordPress. I'm still trying to figure out if we always want to be doing things from, if we want to execute actions against the whole dependency chain or not. But just for the moment, for like a simple implementation, that's what's happening. So what I was hoping to do, now that we have enough to kind of look at it, if people were interested in using this as a basis to talk about the dependency spec and get a feel for how much of this is useful and where else it could go, maybe it'd be helpful to have a separate meeting to have people talk about it further and see, because I hate to over-design dependencies, to be honest. For our purposes, this is a lot, this is enough. For example, Porter doesn't at the moment do dependencies of dependencies, mostly because from a complexity standpoint, it confuses people, and we found that no one actually needed it or wanted it, so we explicitly didn't put it in there. So it'd be interesting to talk to the people and see what their customers or people would use it for, and see what really needs to go into the spec or not. And sorry, I haven't caught up with chat yet. So.
I was trying to answer questions for you while you were demoing.
Oh, okay, thanks. So are dependencies executed in order from Sylvan? Yeah. So at the moment, we don't really have this concept of like reusing dependencies. So you say who you depend upon. Say you depend on 6 different things. You can say I depend on these 6 things, and we'll go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 and execute them. But there isn't really the concept of like a diamond dependency where like I depend on this, you depend on that, and we both share the same thing down at the bottom. And that's a complex thing that it's not always clear if it's something that the dependency management concept inside of CNAB should do, or if that's a concept that the bundle author should actually be figuring out, installing once, and then handling, making that a shared instance, or not, if that makes sense. These are types of questions that I could get into a lot more detail as we talk about, because these are things that we could really overcomplicate inside the spec and have the runtime have to deal with a lot of things. And I think we could make our lives very difficult and maybe only end up having less than 1% of users use. Or we could push some of these things on bundle authors and have them have a simple set of constructs that they could then use to make shared instances and things like that, and kind of implement on their own some of these things. So be really interested in talking to people further if they think they'd be interested in using dependencies. The end.
Cool.
Thanks for showing that, Carolyn. I think it's totally worth having some sidebars if people are interested in chatting about dependencies. I am. So.
Yeah, I think maybe another meeting might make sense because there's a lot to discuss.
Yeah, sure.
Feel free to add this to the off week, to the week when we don't have the community meeting, but when we discuss the other specifications. That's the totally great topic for that. I know we missed the last one and people might be confused about it, but we still have it every other week.
Oh, I'm totally gonna do that because I don't have to schedule a meeting. Thanks, Radu.
Yeah, good call, Radu. Okay, so the next thing on the list is, let me share my screen again. From HashiConf last week, we did a demo of Porter and CNAB as part of the Microsoft keynote. I threw a YouTube link in here of just that section, so if anybody wants to go and watch it. We basically deployed some infrastructure to DigitalOcean and then used Helm to deploy some stuff to Kubernetes. It's about 7 minutes, I think, so won't show it here, but pretty useful to watch. Next one is Carolyn. We started introducing some new contributor stuff in Porter, and she wants to bring those things to CNAB. So you want me to open this up, or do you want to share, Carolyn?
Yeah, you can just open it up.
Okay.
Specifically, we added a ladder to make it more clear when people can expect and be asking that, hey, maybe I should be a member, or I should be a maintainer at this point. And we should be looking to invite people to be maintainers after participating for a period of time, so that they haven't been, say, participating for months, and then we finally realize it only after 6 months and things like that. So that we kind of constantly have an influx of active maintainers. So we did this reporter where we just lay out what are ways that people can be contributing, both as contributors, maintainers, and for Porter we even have an admin level just for people who really like to maintain, say, like the team security. It's not exciting, but someone has to do it and be available at times to add people to stuff like that. When I showed this to a few people, they thought it would be useful to have this for the CNAB, Duffel, various repos as well, to just kind of explain this and make it easier for people to see what the path is to join in and hang out with us and become a maintainer here on Duffel and CNAB too. So if people like this, I can just blatantly copy and paste this and submit it in a PR to our repos. And we can edit it and tweak it for what makes sense for us as well.
I think that would be great.
Me too.
Yeah, that's good.
Oh, the other piece is like at meetings like this, we just kind of keep an eye out for people who have been contributing often and make sure to ask them if they'd like to be a maintainer after a while. Because otherwise people sometimes don't think to nominate themselves because they're shy or they may not have read this even when it's up there. So we just try to be proactive about that and ask people. That was the other piece of it.
Cool. Any other comments on this? All right, let's keep moving along then. Next, we have updates on the CNAB security spec.
Hi. I'm hoping someone can help me take minutes from here, because it's going to be hard to type and see everything.
Radu's doing the minutes for us.
Great, thanks. Yeah, so just a quick update. I can talk about it in more detail next week, but while Radu was away on vacation, I was up to no good. He had some concerns, so as I was writing the spec, which you saw the last time was this gigantic spec, the too long didn't read it, I split it into 3 because it became quickly very confusing which parts were optional, which parts were not, right? So some people might have, like I said, 2 servers, one for the metadata, one for the images and bundles, right? We're still talking about whether to standardize where we want to keep the bundle, right? For example, it could be in the OCI index itself. And then I had the follow-up question as well, why not stick all the tough and in total metadata in the OCI index too? And some people want it and some people don't want it. So that stuff like that should be optional, right? But it shouldn't change the security guarantees. So I thought splitting the document into 3 would make all of this much clearer to delineate, and that's what I'm working on. So there's 3 more PRs. So this PR has become just a meta PR. There's not much to it. The real meat is in the 3 sub PRs, if you will, in there. That's it from me. Does anyone have any specific questions? I should mention that the first PR is what the metadata repository should look like. I'm using the terms that Radu prescribed, which I think make a lot of sense. These are just servers. Metadata repository is just a server Could be your OCI index, could be a completely different server, doesn't matter. But this is where you keep your tough and or in toto metadata, right? You keep it somewhere, that's it. We don't tell you what the metadata should look like, how many keys you should use, but I do go into some detail into prescribe what I think is a good idea in there. Radu should feel free to add his own model in there. He has a particular one that he calls, backed with the implementation called CNAB to OCI, that he should discuss in there. The next PR is about signing workflows, which again really depends on your exact setup. So there's, again, is normative, nothing prescriptive. The last PR should be the least controversial. This one just says, well, I don't care how you sign your metadata. I don't really care where you keep it. But how you check the metadata should be the same no matter how you set up your keys. So this should be the least controversial part. That's it. Radu, do you have any questions in particular?
No, the one thing I wanted to add to this discussion is that if people are interested about the security discussion, there's also an item in the OCI artifacts project that is interested in looking at provenance and security for OCI artifacts. And there are some somewhat parallel discussions, but they're converging a lot on the same issues. So if you're interested in that, make sure to check these discussions as well.
Where would they do that best, Radu? Is it at HackMD document that we should paste here, or in the chat, or their open container Slack?
Yeah, I think the open container Slack is the best way to be right now. And I'll post the link to that Slack in the agenda notes.
Okay, thanks.
Yeah, there's a specific room in there, artifacts, it's called.
Yeah, I forget the name right now.
Cool. So we can drop that info into the minutes. That would be really great.
Yep.
Last thing, something I added today, in Porter, we're starting to work on thick bundles, adding support for that. So one of the things I started to do today was to look at how we implemented exporting things in Duffel. And a lot of it seems pretty not tied to Duffel. It's a lot of wrapping up like Docker libraries. So it seems like something that might make sense to move to cnab-go. Does anybody have any objection to that or any thoughts about that before I start working on that and open a PR?
Actually, I think that's where it should have been in the first place, since the way thick bundles are supposed to be represented is in the specification.
Yeah, also agree on that.
Thanks for that.
Okay, cool. So that kind of wraps up our agenda. Is there anything anybody wants to add at the last minute? We have a little bit of time left. Or
Chris T wants to introduce himself, didn't he?
Cool, yeah. Anybody that joined late and didn't get to introduce themselves, have at it.
Hey, thanks guys. Let me show my screen or my camera so you know what I look like. So hey there guys. I'm Chris Tanog. I work at Citrix. I think I went to HashiConf last week and met Jeremy and talked to him at length. I hope yeah. Yeah, just trying to get familiar. I saw the demo at the keynote and thought that could be really useful for our needs. So I'm part of the one of the release teams at Citrix, handling the framework around how we deploy dependencies, and so it seems like CNABs are kind of up my alley. So yeah, so just happy to soak in all the information, and hopefully I can be a contributor and contribute to the project. So that's me.
Cool. Well, welcome.
Thank you.
And looks like Radu added one more agenda item. Take it away, Radu.
Yeah, I just wanted to. I just want to say that I'm going to start looking again at the changes required so the discussion with the OCI community around representing CNAB bundles as an OCI index is around either having a new version of the OCI index or having a breaking change or just an additional additive change. So at the beginning of next week, I'm going to start looking at the recommendation from the OCI community to experiment with both approaches, and I'll probably ping Sylvain and other people interested in this as well. So if you're interested in the OCI index discussion, just hop into the CNAB Slack and we can chat about it.
Awesome. That's something I think we really need actually for dependencies is a standard way to reference bundles. And if we store them as OCI artifacts, that's exactly what we need.
All right. Well, go ahead.
Sorry? Sorry. Not just a standard way of referencing bundles, but probably even pulling them, right? If it's not clear, if you have a completely different way to store a bundle somewhere, how do you pull them?
So that is actually already implemented in Porter. So it's just a matter of rebasing the PR for Duffel. The larger question is having a standard way of representing the CNAB bundle in OCI rather than using annotation as we do right now in cnab-go-OCI. So we have a stable library right now for that, for using OCI registers to store bundles, and we can do all the things, we can reference them and pull bundles. But it is, at the moment, it is not a standard way of doing it because we're using annotations which are optional in all registries. We're looking at a way of standardizing that as an OCI index, and we're actively working with the OCI community for that.
Would it make sense to see a demo of like pushing and pulling bundles next time? If anybody wants to see that.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. We can demo cnab-to-OCI next time.
Cool. Okay, unless anybody has anything else, we can adjourn for today. All right. Thanks, everybody.
Bye-bye.
Bye.